It's just spilled everywhere. Why does this happen to me? Okay. What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is CAITLYN. I just completed my first ever marathon in 3 hours, 10 minutes, and 7 seconds. It was a great time. I need my coffee. Okay. It was so much fun. I enjoyed the process so much. I basically shared the entire process through my Instagram and my TikTok. But basically after my marathon was over, I put up a little question box on my Instagram and I had you guys ask me all of your questions regarding my marathon, my training, the race, whatever you guys wanted to ask. So today I'm going to be answering those questions. I have my questions right here on my laptop. First question, which is honestly probably the most asked question that I got on here. How did you create your training program? It seemed unique. So a lot of the questions that I got on here was, number one, did I follow someone's training plan? Did I have a coach? No, I did not have a coach. I created my own training plan specifically for me and my needs. A lot of the questions on here are like, can you share your training program, blah, blah, blah. And I've had people like DM me asking me like, hey, can you give me your training program? And to be honest, no. I don't mean to sound like mean or anything, but this training program was made specifically for me. What works for me is probably not going to work for you. So I'm not just going to give anyone the training program that I followed. I created it specifically for myself, not for anyone else. So basically my program that I created for myself was unique in that I incorporated a ton of lifting into the program. I've been lifting for several years. I did not want to lose a ton of muscle. I wanted to maintain my muscle throughout the training. I knew that it would only help me with the marathon. So I basically programmed a lot of my lifts around my marathon training, and like the exercises themselves were very specific to my training, working on more like unilateral movements to make sure that there were no like muscle imbalances going on. I created my own mileage. I worked my way up. I increased my mileage throughout the whole training plan. I basically created it with the knowledge that I previously had. I have run a half marathon before. I kind of took what I learned from training for the half and created my own program for the full. Safe to say it worked out. What did you tell yourself in the last couple of miles of the race to keep you going? All right, so in the last couple of miles of the race, number one, my AirPods died at mile 22.5, which was very sad, but I knew they were gonna die before the 26. So for about 2 miles, I was literally singing songs to myself, like pretending that I somehow had AirPods in to try to make the time go faster. I would say at like mile 24, everything just tightened up on me. I've never experienced it in my life. My quads, my hamstrings especially, even my calves, which never really tighten up, they like turned into rocks. I was like, oh my God, I am getting tired. I can tell. I knew that I was within my goal. I just have to hold this and I 100% am going to break 3 hours and 15 minutes. Like I already knew at that point I was, just because I had my watch and I can see all my splits. So I knew that I was going to break the time and I was like, I just have to keep going. At that point, when you're 24 miles into a run, you're almost dazed. Like you're not really there. You're there, but you're not really there. Yeah, those last 2 miles were definitely brutal. They were tough, but actually my 26th mile was my fastest mile of the race. It was a 6:57. I was so ready to be done with the race, which I think also tells me that I had a little bit more in the tank. So something to note for the next race. What did your training weeks look like? How heavy were you lifting? Okay, so I gave myself 5 months to train for this marathon. I would say my first like 2 months, I was trying my hardest not to reduce the weight by too much. But with that being said, it was very like intuitive. Like as my mileage began to increase, the weight that I was using began to decrease. Just because say I had a 10-mile run, I'm not gonna go lift and be able to squat as much as I can when I go in with fresh legs. Obviously, I still wanted to use a weight that was challenging for me, but I didn't go to the point where I knew that I would be sore the next day, if that makes sense. When I got closer and closer to the marathon, that's when I really just started to reduce my volume, the weight, all of that stuff. I didn't want to be fatigued at all for the race. But again, like how heavy I'm lifting really doesn't matter for anyone else because it's my starting point. So if you're new to lifting, you would not be lifting as heavy as I am. And maybe if you're a much more experienced lifter, you'd be lifting heavier than me. So it's very dependent on where you're at. Best thing you took away from the experience. I would say the mental gains were huge. Going into this process, I was so scared. Like I didn't even know if I would be able to do the full 26.2. And I don't know, just to see that progress and like my long runs just slowly increase. I think with any sport, there's just so much that you gain mentally. Seeing my body change, more so my endurance, like it was so cool to just see how in shape I was able to get through this process. Endurance wise, I've never been able to do some of the workouts that I did, like do them in the times that I did, just like with my workouts and my mile repeats and all the stuff that I did. It was really cool to just see my body adapt to the heavier mileage and just more volume. It was crazy. What would you do to better yourself for the next marathon, even though you did amazing? I don't know. I think for the next marathon, if I do another marathon, honestly, I would say to actually reduce my mileage a little bit more than what it was, or just kind of build it up a little bit differently, I'd say. I feel like I got to a point where I didn't need to be running as much as I was, but I just was running that much. And I also kind of felt like I could have taken a little less time to train. I did my 24-mile run 3 weeks prior to the race, and I almost feel like that was my peak. Like I had such a great long run that day, and I even thought to myself like, wow, if I had done the race today, I would have felt amazing. Not that I didn't feel great for the race, but I just felt like the 3-week taper was almost just like a drag, and it almost made me feel like my training was a little too long. It's not necessarily about how many miles you rack up per week. It's more about the quality of the miles. So I would say like less is more. Did you ever feel like you weren't going to be able to finish? No, I knew I would be able to finish the race, partly because I did a 24-mile long run 3 weeks prior. I felt great on that run. I could have done the full 26 that day. My training was very hard and intense. I knew that I would be able to finish the race, no doubt. It was more, can I finish the race in the time that I wanted? Was there anything that happened differently than you thought it would? I think the thing that happened differently is that I was feeling so great. Like, it's so weird how on race day you can literally run 20 seconds faster per mile and feel absolutely great. Like, I remember going through the halfway point. The marathon was like a 13.1 mile loop twice. Like, I didn't even feel fatigued or tired in the slightest, which was great for me. I knew that, the next 13 were going to be tougher, but yeah, I don't know. I think the thing that really surprised me is just how much like your adrenaline and your training can just help you in a race. How did you go about steadily increasing mileage? When I started my training, I was really just kind of running like a baseline mileage that was comfortable for me at the time, kind of just like my average mileage that I was running. I think I started around like 37 to 38 miles per week, and then every couple weeks I would just bump that up a bit. And it wasn't really like I had to think about how much I was running, because basically I programmed in my training plan that like my long runs every couple weeks would basically just increase, and that's kind of where the mileage came from. So the mileage slowly increased more so because my long runs increased, so that just increased my mileage. And then some of my running workouts, those increased mileage as well. But my easy runs or just like my moderate runs never really changed. Shoes, did you rotate through different shoes while training? How do you avoid blisters? I did rotate shoes once, but that was only because The shoes that I started with, I had since like the winter, so I knew that I needed a new pair. And I got those probably like 2 months into training, more just because it was time for those shoes to go. I basically switched shoes every 6 months. So it wasn't like I rotated because I was marathon training. It was more just, it was time for those shoes to say goodbye. And I stuck with the same pair of shoes that I trained with the rest of the time. I wore those same shoes during the race. I didn't race in different shoes. I've never really had a problem with blisters, but I did get a few during marathon training, especially on my long runs, but it wasn't like a huge issue. I feel like blisters has to more do with like the shape of your foot or the shoe that you're wearing. How many hours a day did you spend training? That's very dependent on what I had that day. So obviously if I had a 20-mile long run, then it would be however much time the long run took. And on days where I would run and lift, usually my runs were lower mileage, so like 5 to 9 miles, I would do that. So say I ran 4 miles, that'd be like, or 5 miles, that would be 40 minutes-ish, and then I would lift for around 40 minutes. So anywhere from like, I'd say an hour and a half to 2 hours. The thing about marathon training is it takes time. Like your runs are longer, everything's just longer. So it's definitely more time consuming than what I'm doing now, where I can just go to the gym now and lift and then leave. I don't have to run for an hour and then lift. So yeah, but I would say that overall my lifts were much shorter. So anywhere from like 30 to 45 minutes were how long my lifts were. Congrats. Next marathon. Okay, so obviously I qualified for Boston by 20 minutes, which was really cool. I don't know if I want to do Boston. It's funny because the registration for Boston is November 8th. So in 8 days is when I can register if I want to do Boston. I just don't know if right now is necessarily the right time for me to do Boston because it's in April. I have some really big things coming up in the new year, which I can't share just yet, but also marathon training is a lot on your body and I want to give myself rest, like my knees, my legs, like they need some love. They need a little bit of rest. So I don't know if I really want to go into training for Boston because I would basically need to start, if I decided to do Boston, I would need to start training for it in like 2 months. I'm really just focusing on strength right now. I was not able to lift very heavy at all, lost some of the gains, which was sad. I'm not exactly sure when the next race is, if I'm doing Boston. I'm going to be deciding in the coming weeks though. Did you do any speed, 200 meter, 400 meter repeats, or strength work, mile repeats while training? So I didn't do any 200, 400 meter repeat stuff. If I did a 400 meter, it would just be like at the end of a workout. So I might end with a couple 400s, but mile repeats were my thing. Like I loved those. Those helped me so much with my training. If you guys followed my Instagram, you would basically see every Wednesday was Workout Wednesday, and I would do some sort of treadmill workout. I also prefer doing my workouts on the treadmill because it literally gives you the pace. Like I'll put it at the pace that I need to run at, and that's my pace. So I'm not going slower or faster. I just don't have to think about the pace, which I prefer when I train. I did mile repeats. I did some like tempo training, like fartleks, and then I did progression runs. Those were like my main things. I really didn't focus much on speed because I'm running a marathon. So if I was running a shorter distance race, definitely, but 200 meter, 400 meter repeats are really not going to do much for you when you're marathon training. How did you prepare the day before? Diet, exercise, etc. The day before my race, I ran 5 miles. People ask me why I ran the day before the race. Typically my rest days were on Mondays for running, and I was just used to running basically Tuesday through Sunday. So I didn't want to throw my body off by taking my rest day on Saturday when I never take my rest day on Saturday. It was just an easy 5-mile run. It wasn't anything fatiguing. It was just what I wanted to do. Keep my body consistent. You have to be consistent about your training plan. Diet-wise, nothing was crazy different. I definitely ate more carbs the day before, but nothing different from what I was normally doing. Just basically making sure I was drinking enough water and eating enough. Was it easier or more difficult than you thought? Will you do Boston since you are a stud and qualified? Yeah, so not sure about the whole Boston thing. Was it easier or more difficult than I thought? It was probably right about what I thought it would be. I didn't think that I would not be able to walk after the race. That was kind of shocking. After I finished, I was limping off. When we left, I was with my parents and we had to cross the road and there was a car coming. My dad's like, run. I was like, I can't. Dad, I cannot run. It was I don't know. I just my whole body was so tight and sore. So was not expecting that. What did you listen to during the marathon? Drop the playlist, please. So I actually got Spotify and I created my own playlist, but I'm canceling my Spotify. I only got Spotify for the marathon. So sorry, you can't have my playlist because it's canceled. But I basically just did a mix of country and pop. All my favorite songs. Did you hydrate during the marathon? If so, how many times? Yes. So I got a sip of water at mile 10 and at mile 20. That was it. Just a sip at each. People think I'm crazy, and I got so many messages during my training about hey, you need to be hydrating more. You need to be doing this, that. But honestly, I conditioned myself that way. When I trained for my half marathon, I never stopped for water. I never trained with water once. So for me, I'm very used to not stopping for water on my runs. I was totally fine and I would not have changed my hydration at all. And then in terms of fueling during the race, I took one gel at mile 12, I believe, and then one gel at mile 20, which is exactly how I trained. I trained taking my gels at those points and it worked out great for me. So if you're gonna marathon train, number one, make sure you train with fuel. I feel like I started training with gels a little too late. I could have started a little bit earlier just to get my body used to it, because there was definitely a period where when I started training with gels that I would literally cramp up so bad when I would take it, because my body was just not used to ever fueling during a run. Start fueling sooner than later. Do not wait until race week or a couple weeks before race week to start fueling. Fuel before, get your body used to it, and find a system that works for you. I found that fueling around mile 12, 13, and then at mile 20 was perfect for me. And that's just the way that I trained. So I knew exactly going into the race when I was going to fuel. I already had my plan. How long have you been running? So my senior year of high school, I decided to do cross country because my friends convinced me. And I did that for a year. And then in college, I actually played softball. I always kind of just ran on the side. I enjoyed running. And then my senior year of college, my roommate convinced me to do indoor track with her. So I did that. I loved it. I had a great season. And that's kind of what stemmed the whole running thing. What did you find the most beneficial in your training? Definitely the workouts. So every Wednesday or Thursday, depending on the week, I would do some sort of workout on the treadmill. Do you warm up before your runs? And if you do, what kind of warm-ups? Yeah, so I do dynamic warm-ups, quad pulls, knee pulls, leg swings, all that good stuff. Can you make a running guide for how to run a half or full marathon? I've actually really considered doing this. The only thing is, I really don't think that there's one cookie cutter plan that works for everyone. Like I said, my plan was so individualized to myself. So if I were to do this, I would honestly want to create a plan specifically for them and where they're at. So that's why I haven't just released some random plan, because I think everyone's so different and they need their own plan. But it's something that I'm considering doing. So if you guys are interested, let me know. Have you ever had injury related to running? Not really, no. I've definitely had shin pain / shin splints, but they never really lasted super long. I actually wear a little toe thing for the bottom of my toe, the bone of my right toe started to really hurt during school. But I just got a little pad underneath it and it worked wonders. But that's really the only thing that I've ever really experienced. And I credit that to lifting. Do you run on trails or the road in the winter? I always run on the road. I just prefer road running. I don't know. It's just me. Do you carry water with you on runs? No. I never carry water with me. I'll plan my route so that I'll kind of do a loop back to wherever I planted my water. I'll get a sip there and then I'll keep going. Did you ever run a half marathon before? Yes, I ran a half marathon my senior year of college in October, so that was 2 years ago. How long should I train before my first marathon? I gave myself 5 months to train and it was my first marathon. Everyone's different though. It really depends on your running experience, so it's kind of hard for me to answer that question. What hurt the most afterwards? By the way, congrats. Thank you. I'd say what hurt the most afterwards were my hamstrings. They were so tight. Did you have a pace plan? Yes. So actually, funny story. There were pacers at the race. There was a 7:10 pacer, a 7:30 pacer, a 7:45, I think, and then like an 8-minute pacer. So before the race, I saw the 7:30 pacer. I kind of knew in my head, I was like, okay, I know I can go faster than a 7:30, but I don't think I can do a 7:10. I think that's way too fast for me. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna stick with the 7:30 pacer, and then if I'm feeling okay, I'll start to go ahead of them. So I like saw him before the race, and he was like, oh, like, are you trying to run a 7:30 like mile? I was like, yeah, that's the goal. So he's like, okay, well, just, stick with me. I'm really good at this, blah, blah, blah. And like, as soon as the race started, I was just like, gone. I did not see him. My first mile was a 7:28. I was still ahead of him. I think he was a little behind in the first mile. I told myself that I didn't want to go out too fast. That was my plan the whole time. I was like, okay, I'm not going to go out too fast. I'm going to feel my way in. If I'm feeling great, I'll push the pace. But the last thing I want to do is go out way too hard and then suffer for 26.2 miles. Basically from there, my splits just kept getting lower and lower. I was feeling great. And then I was like banging out like 7:04, 7:05, 7:08. My average split for the race was like a 7:13 or 7:16. I just kind of felt it out really. But my pace plan from the start was just to not go out too hard. Will you consider doing an ultra? No, I don't think I will. I really don't know how these ultra runners do it. Props to them, but I just like want to be able to have good knees when I'm 50, and I even feel like the marathon was pushing it a little with like my knees and pain. It was like joint pain. So I don't know. I don't think I could ever do an ultra, more because I want my body to be as healthy and strong as possible, and I just feel like the ultra is pushing it a little too much. How did you hold your phone while running, and what device did you use to track your pace? I ran with leggings that had side pockets. They weren't amazing, but they did the trick. That's what I always do. I always run with shorts or leggings that have side pockets. I always run with my phone. It's more of like a safety thing. I also run with AirPods, so they have to be connected to my phone. If you're a runner and you don't run with your phone, I mean, I get it because it's like big and bulky, but if you find the right pair of leggings or shorts, I think it's such a good idea to run with your phone. It's more of like a safety thing. So I use my Coros watch. This is the Apex Pro. I absolutely love it. It is honestly the best watch ever. It is the best investment ever. So what do you eat to feel good while running and get enough energy? You eat lots of food. My food intake increased so much throughout this marathon training. I was definitely, and honestly, I still am eating 3,000 plus calories a day, just because when you're training hard, you need that fuel. I feel like my hunger is still kind of there. Like my body still kind of thinks I'm marathon training, even though I'm not. I'm sure it will start to eventually go down. But yeah, you have to fuel your body. If you're hungry, you just have to eat. And I mean, in terms of like what I ate, just, the same stuff that I've always eaten. Whole foods, plant-based protein sources, lots of carbs, all the good stuff, and lots of peanut butter. What was your weekly mileage? I posted all of my weekly mileages, is that a word? Every single week on my Instagram. So if you go back every single Monday, I would post the previous mileage week so you guys could see exactly what I ran. I also would put in what my workouts were for that week. So if you're curious about how my mileage slowly increased, take a little creep back on the Insta. You can see literally every single week from the start. What kind of background do you need to have for starting marathon training? I actually really like this question because I've had a lot of people message me on Instagram telling me congrats and that I've inspired them to run a marathon, which I really do appreciate it. But I also think that you don't have to train for a marathon. That's a lot. And I've been running for a while. So for me, I've done a half before. I ran in college. I have a lot of miles behind me. For people who are newer to running, it's like you don't have to go from 0 to marathon. Like, you could train for a 5K first, then you could train for a 10K, then you can maybe train for a half marathon. I'm not saying you can't. I'm not saying that at all. I just wouldn't recommend it because I think your body is going to be hurting. Like, it is just such a shock to your body. Even for me, being someone who has been running for years, lifting for years, marathon training was a lot on my body. I would not recommend marathon training unless you have a pretty good running background, or you just, give yourself enough time to do it. You need some distance training, you need some miles behind you, and there's nothing wrong with, making your first race that you ever do. If you want to get into running, that's so awesome, but you don't have to like do a marathon to be a runner. You can do a 5K, you could do like literally any distance race. It doesn't have to be a marathon. That's kind of like the extreme. Are you vegan? No, I'm not vegan. I am vegetarian though, and I'm lactose intolerant, so I don't really eat dairy, but I have eggs, honey. Did you experience any extreme hunger while beginning to train? No, I mean, I definitely noticed that I got more hungry throughout the training, but then I would just eat more. So I wouldn't be like extremely hungry. If I was really hungry, I would just go eat. Had you ever ran 42 km before? So no, so before the race, the longest I had run was a 24-mile long run. A lot of training plans will do like you go up to 20 or 22. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do 24. So I don't know. I'm like that. I wanted to do a 24-mile so that I was only 2 miles away from that distance, just so my body really knew what it felt like. That was just my preference. How do you manage water, food, and bathroom while in a marathon? Oh, it's just spilled everywhere. Why does this happen to me? Okay. So I feel like a lot of people were like, what's your plan if you have to pee? And I don't know, I kind of found this weird because maybe some people just like pee all the time during their runs, but I literally never go to the bathroom when I run. I never have to. Throughout my whole training, when I did the 24-mile run, when I did my 22-mile run, my 20-mile run, I never once peed during the run. So like for me, it was kind of just like, well, I'm just not gonna have to pee because I never have to pee on my runs. It was actually weird though, because during the race at like mile 7, I was like, I kind of feel like I have to go to the bathroom. And then like mile 8, I was like, I definitely have to go pee. And I was like thinking to myself for a couple miles, like, oh my God, this has never really happened. And I couldn't really tell if it's just like my nerves or like I actually had to pee. And I think it was more just nerves. 2 miles later, like it just kind of went away. And I was like, yeah, I don't have to pee. I never had to pee during the race, but I guess if I did, there are porta potties along the course. That's pretty standard for any race. So if you really gotta go, there's porta potties. I actually saw a couple people during the race go to the bathroom. How did you overcome the mental barrier? I think the training is really how I overcame the mental barrier, because like going into the race, I was like, I have put in so much time and effort into this race. Like I knew that I had put in the necessary training for that race. I knew I was totally prepared. That gave me a lot of mental strength. One thing that I love about running is like you just grow so much mentally through like the training in the process of doing a race, which is why I would recommend everyone to do some sort of a race. It does not have to be a marathon, but you grow so much during the process. You show up every single day for yourself. You do the workout, you surprise yourself with the workouts that you do. How much strength training did you do? So typically I would lift around 4 to 5 days a week. When I started off training, I was lifting like 5 days a week just because my mileage wasn't super high when I started training. As the mileage increased, I kind of started lifting more around 4 times a week just because couldn't really manage to do the 5 days with all the mileage. Did you hit the wall? If so, how did you push past it? My first marathon is in 3 weeks. Oh my God, that's exciting. I would say I like hit the wall around mile 24, but it wasn't necessarily like I hit a wall and was dead. So I never really would say that I hit the wall, but I'd say the most fatigue that I felt was mile 24. And it's funny because I was honestly shocked at this. So during the race at like mile 24, I started to just pass so many people that were ahead of me, which meant like they were running a pretty good time if they were ahead of me at mile 24, because I mean, I ran a pretty good time. All of a sudden, they just stopped. They just started walking. And I'm thinking to myself, like, you are running this pace right now. Like, I'm looking at my splits. I'm running like a 7:04, 7:05. So these people are running faster than me. And it's like mile 24 and they're stopped. Like, they started walking and I was so shocked by it. I was like, they're stopping? Like, we have 2 miles left. Like, I don't know. I thought it was so interesting. I almost wanted to be like, come on, we're almost there. It's the mental. It's all mental. Like, you just have to keep pushing, keep going. And I remember like that last 0.5 miles, I just remember thinking to myself, like, oh my God, I just want to see the finish line. Like, I just want to come out of this trail, because right when you get out of the trail, like, the finish line is right there. And I was just like looking for for the light at the end, like waiting to see, and then we finally got there. So with less running now, is there a certain amount of time you spend working out? Yeah, so now that I'm not marathon training, I'm able to put a lot more emphasis, volume, and weight into my lifts, which has been so nice. I am already loving it. Upper body days are probably around 45 minutes, and then lower body are probably more so around an hour, just because it takes more time to set up the exercises. You know, there's more rest time between sets. You're going heavier, you need a little bit more rest time. So there's just a little more downtime, but yeah, so now my training is around 40 to an hour, I'd say. How many calories a day did you have during training, and were you ever in a deficit? No, I was never in a deficit. If you're training for a race, there is literally no need to be in a deficit. I don't know why you would do that. Around 3,000 plus calories a day. Did you use salt tablets? No, I did not. Started marathon training, but illness stopped my training for 4 weeks. Can I get back on track? 100% yes, you totally can. Setbacks happen. During my marathon training in the summer, I got COVID. That put me out for like a week-ish. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh my God, this is awful. Like, I was really progressing with my running and I'm just gonna set myself back. I feel like it came at the perfect time, because I was kind of like at the halfway point of my training, so 2.5 months into it. And it was almost like a deload week, where I just basically took that week to rest my body. And honestly, I think that in the next time I do a marathon, I will implement a week during my training where I go back super far in mileage, just to like give your body that break. It's crazy how much I actually think it helped me. You definitely can get back on track. I know that's yours is 4 weeks, so that's like a month. There's no reason that you can't get back on track. You can do it. What are your favorite training sessions? My favorite training sessions are my lifts. I feel like during the marathon training, towards the end, I was really just feeling like running was more of a chore. I was really missing my lifts, lifting heavy. I could start to kind of just see like the gains go away. I didn't feel as like lean, as toned as I did before. And it was definitely kind of mentally challenging, but I just had to like remind myself of what my end goal was. I would say that my favorite training sessions for the marathon training, honestly, the workouts, they were hard, but they're so rewarding. Like when you're done, it's like, oh, I just did this 10-mile workout and I feel amazing. Will you be running another marathon / keep running long distances? Right now, I am not running long distances. I have literally barely run since the marathon. I did a 4-mile run the other day. That was the first run that I've done since the marathon. Right now, there's no need for me to be running crazy long distances, because I'm not training for a race right now and I'm giving my body a break and I want to get strong. How did 26 feel at a faster pace than your 22-mile runs? Nervous for my first marathon. It's crazy how on race day, the pace that I ran just didn't even feel that bad at all. Your body just like shifts into that mode on race day. So do you ever feel pressure that you feel you have to live up to being on this account? I actually love this question, because I remember the week before the marathon, I was like talking to my mom and I was like, oh, I'm just so nervous for this race. And she's like, Caitlyn, why are you nervous? Like, if you don't do well, you're like the only one that's gonna know. I like was thinking to myself, like, yeah, you're right. And then I was like, no, I'm not, because I have this public profile that I've literally been sharing with everyone, my whole training plan and for the past 5 months, like I've just been sharing to 45,000 people my training plan and what I'm doing and all these runs. And yeah, I mean, I definitely did feel pressure throughout the training to perform really well, because I have all these people watching me and asking me all these questions like I'm some expert at running a marathon, even though I had never run a marathon. Obviously, it's my choice. I'm choosing to have this public platform. I'm choosing to share the ups and the downs. So at the end of the day, you know, I am doing this for myself. I'm not doing it to please anyone on Instagram or social media. So I'm doing it for me. I think that's the most important part. What is your easy run pace from like a 7:45 to an 8-minute mile? How did you manage anxiety periods through your marathon preparation? I don't know. I would just try to keep myself busy, honestly. The week before, I was definitely very anxious the week before. I wanted Sunday to come. I just wanted to race. I knew that as soon as the race started, I would be absolutely fine. No anxiety. Like I was just ready to start the race. But yeah, I just had to keep myself busy. I'm a pretty busy person, so that helps. What did you eat on marathon morning? So I had a banana with lots of peanut butter, and then I had the Nature Valley granola bars. And I had practiced kind of like what I was going to eat before. I would eat the same exact things before all my long runs. So I knew exactly what I was going to eat. I knew it would sit well with my stomach. Practice eating the same way that you're going to eat before your marathon and see how you like it. There are so many questions. Did you notice any physical changes throughout your training? Yes, I lost muscle because I just wasn't lifting as heavy. Didn't really feel as snatched, as tight as I normally do. So that was the biggest thing, which was sad, but it's okay, we're getting it back. Was listening to music during the marathon a good idea? Yes, listening to music while you run is always a good idea. I worry about knee impact when running on roads/paved paths for training. Did you have any issues? I will say my knees started to hurt a little towards the end of training, but not super bad, like at all. Really, the only time my knees ever really hurt was after the marathon. My left knee actually kind of swelled up after the marathon, which I was shocked about. I was like, what is going on? But if you do, I'd recommend running on trails or just softer surfaces. Best piece of advice for someone currently training for a marathon: give yourself enough time, take it slow and steady, quality over quantity, and make sure you mix in different workouts. That is so important. You gotta mix in different running workouts. Oh, and make sure you practice a fueling strategy. Make sure you fuel during your runs, or at least during your long runs. I would only practice fueling on my long run days, but do that so that on marathon day you have it down to a science. Your body is so in tune with it. That's gonna help you a ton. I think we did it. That took so long. All right, now that my coffee is spilled everywhere, well, I hope that I answered all of your questions. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys have been here since day one of my marathon training, I appreciate you. I see you. Make sure to like and subscribe this video. Your support means a ton to me, and it just helps me be able to make more content for you guys. So thank you for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one.